Now let's begin. Spencer Kindle sat in the leather chair of his modest downtown office, watching the rain streak down the window. 23 years of marriage, and it had come to this. The manila envelope on his desk contained divorce papers, delivered that morning by a courier who couldn't meet his eyes. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, Spencer let his mind wander back to when he'd first met Vera Nicholson at a charity fundraiser in 2002. She'd been radiant that night, wearing a red dress that caught every eye in the room. He was a mid-level architect then. She was a real estate agent with ambition that matched her beauty. They married 6 months later, and their son Garrett was born a year after that. Spencer had loved his work, designing community centers, libraries, parks, projects that mattered to people, even if they didn't make him wealthy. Vera had tolerated it at first, but over the years, her disappointment became palpable. She wanted the country club lifestyle, the luxury cars, the vacation homes. Spencer provided a comfortable life, but it was never enough. The real fracture came when Garrett turned 18. Their son had always been different, quiet, introspective, spending hours in his room with computers and books. Vera called him lazy, a failure, an embarrassment. When Garrett dropped out of college after one semester, she'd screamed at Spencer for hours, blaming his mediocre genes for producing such a useless child. Spencer finally opened the envelope. As he read through the petition, his jaw tightened. Vera wasn't just asking for a divorce. She was demanding everything. The house in Riverside Oaks, the savings accounts, both cars, his retirement fund. And there, in cold legal language drafted by her attorney Catherine Wolfe, was the clause that made his blood run cold. Petitioner seeks full custody of all marital assets. Respondent may retain custody of the couple's adult son, Garrett Kindle, as petitioner claims no financial responsibility for said dependent. She didn't want their son. She was treating him like a piece of unwanted furniture. Spencer's phone buzzed. It was a text from Garrett. "Dad, I heard. Are you okay?" He typed back. "I'm fine. Don't worry about anything." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Garrett knew better than to push when his father said he was handling something. The first meeting with his lawyer, Nelson Acevedo, happened 2 days later. Nelson was a bulldog of an attorney, 55 years old with silver hair and a reputation for destroying opposing counsel. "Spencer, I've reviewed everything," Nelson said, spreading documents across the conference table. "This is one of the most aggressive divorce filings I've seen. She's not entitled to half of this. Your business, the intellectual property from your designs, your personal accounts. We can fight this." Spencer shook his head. "I don't want to fight." Nelson's pen stopped mid-note. "Excuse me. Give her what she wants." "Spencer, she's asking for 90% of everything you've built. The house alone is worth $1.2 million. Your retirement fund is. I know what it's worth." Spencer's voice was calm, almost eerily so. "Give her the house, the savings, the cars, everything. I'll sign whatever needs to be signed." Nelson leaned back, studying his client with the intense gaze of someone trying to diagnose insanity. "You're going to walk away with nothing? What about Garrett? What about your future?" "Garrett will be fine. Better than fine." Spencer met his lawyer's eyes. "Trust me on this, Nelson. Just draw up the paperwork agreeing to her terms. I want this done in 30 days. 30 days? Spencer, these things take months, sometimes years. Her lawyer wants it fast. Vera wants it fast. So let's give them fast." Spencer stood, buttoning his jacket. "Do we have an understanding?" Nelson sighed, recognizing the steel beneath his client's quiet demeanor. "You're the client. But Spencer, I hope you know what you're doing." "I do," Spencer said. And for the first time in days, he smiled. The news spread through Vera's family like wildfire. Her brother Raymond Nicholson called her that evening, his voice incredulous. "He's just giving you everything? Just like that?" Vera was at her sister Marion Bender's house, celebrating with champagne. Marion's husband Brad Rhodes, a stockbroker, was equally amazed. "The guy must be even more spineless than you said." "I told you," Vera said, refilling her glass. Spencer never had a backbone. He spent 23 years designing playgrounds and parks for ungrateful communities instead of pursuing real money. "This is exactly what I expected." Marion raised her glass. "To your new beginning. And to Spencer keeping that disappointment, Garrett. At least you won't have to explain to people why your son still lives in your basement at 24. They all laughed. Vera felt a surge of satisfaction. Catherine Wolfe had warned her that Spencer might fight, that most men would drag out a divorce to maintain control or seek revenge. But Spencer was proving to be exactly what she'd always known him to be, weak. "What are you going to do with all that freedom?" Raymond asked. Vera smiled secretively. She hadn't told her family yet about Clinton Hudson, the developer she'd been seeing for 6 months. Clinton was everything Spencer wasn't: aggressive, wealthy, powerful. He owned half the commercial real estate in the downtown corridor. Once the divorce was final, she planned to move in with him. "I'm going to live the life I should have had all along," Vera said. Spencer sat across from Garrett in a quiet diner on the edge of town. His son looked older than his 24 years, with the same thoughtful eyes Spencer saw in the mirror every morning. "You don't have to do this, Dad," Garrett said quietly. "I can." "You can what?" Spencer interrupted gently. "This isn't your fight, Garrett. It never was. She's taking everything you worked for." "Is she?" Spencer took a sip of his coffee. "Son, let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. The things you can touch, the things you can put in a bank or park in a garage, those aren't the things that matter. What matters is what you build inside yourself, what you create that can't be taken away." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "She really doesn't know, does she?" "No. And that's her mistake, not ours." Spencer leaned forward. "How's the Singapore acquisition going?" "Signed yesterday. We finalized the Tokyo expansion last week. The board wants to accelerate the European rollout." Garrett's voice was casual, discussing billion-dollar deals the way other people discussed grocery shopping. Spencer felt a surge of pride. 4 years ago, when Garrett had dropped out of Northwestern, Vera had called him a failure. What she didn't know, what she'd never bothered to discover, was that Garrett had dropped out because a venture capital firm had offered him $50 million for the data analytics software he'd developed in his dorm room. While Vera had been attending charity galas and complaining about their mediocre lifestyle, Garrett had been building an empire. He'd invested that initial $50 million into 3 startups that had all gone public. He'd developed 2 more proprietary algorithms that Fortune 500 companies paid millions to license. At 24 years old, Garrett Kendall was worth $3.2 billion. And he'd done it all while living in his parents' basement, wearing thrift store clothes, and letting his mother call him useless. "Why did you let her treat you like that?" Spencer had asked him once, about 2 years ago when he'd discovered the truth. Garrett had shrugged. "Because it didn't matter what she thought. And I wanted to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing." Now, sitting in the diner, Spencer understood that his son had passed that test. And Vera had failed it spectacularly. "The house," Garrett said. "You know it's—" "I know," Spencer interrupted. "I've known for 6 months, since you bought it through that shell corporation. Vera has no idea she's about to take ownership of a property that's technically yours. The mortgage company is going to call her in about 35 days, Garrett said. Right after the divorce is final. They'll inform her that the property was purchased by Kendall Holdings LLC, and that the mortgage she thinks she's getting is actually a short-term lease agreement that's about to expire." Spencer couldn't help but smile. "And the cars? Both leased through my company. Leases expire in 40 days. The savings accounts? Joint accounts that were funded through my investments. Once I withdraw my capital." Garrett trailed off meaningfully. Spencer shook his head in wonder. "When did you set all this up?" "When you told me a year ago that Mom was having an affair. I figured it was only a matter of time." Garrett's face hardened, the only sign of the pain his mother's betrayal had caused. "I'm not doing this for revenge, Dad. I'm doing this because she needs to understand that actions have consequences. She threw away her family for money and status. She should learn what those things are really worth. Your mother is going to be blindsided." "Good," Garrett said simply. "She blindsided you. She blindsided me. Turnabout is fair play." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, father and son, united in understanding. "What will you do after?" Garrett asked. "After all this settles?" Spencer had been thinking about that. "There's a firm in Portland that wants me to design a children's hospital. It's the kind of project I always dreamed about. I think I'll take it. Start fresh." "I'd like to fund it," Garrett said. "The hospital. Anonymous donation, but I want to make sure you have the budget to do it right." Spencer felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You never gave up on me, Dad. Even when Mom was calling me a failure, you just smiled and told me to be patient. You knew, didn't you? Even before you found out about the money, you knew I'd be okay. I knew you had something special inside you, Spencer said. I just didn't know it was worth $3.2 billion. Garrett laughed, a genuine sound that reminded Spencer of when his son was little. The money doesn't matter. What matters is that you believed in me when nobody else did. They finished their coffee, made their plans, and prepared for what was coming. In 30 days, Vera Nicholson would learn the most expensive lesson of her life. And Spencer Kendall, the man she dismissed as weak and spineless, would walk away with the only thing that had ever truly mattered: his son's love and respect. The game was set. The pieces were in motion, and Vera had no idea she'd already lost. The divorce proceedings were almost anticlimactic. Catherine Wolfe, Vera's attorney, came into the mediation session prepared for battle and found no opposition. Nelson Acevedo presented Spencer's unconditional agreement to all terms. Judge Frances Kane presided over the preliminary hearing, her expression growing increasingly bewildered as she read through the settlement. "Mr. Kendall," she said, removing her glasses, "I want to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. You're surrendering the marital home valued at $1.2 million, $340,000 in savings accounts, 2 vehicles, and your retirement fund. In exchange, you're receiving nothing?" "I'm receiving my freedom, Your Honor," Spencer said calmly. "In custody of my son, though he's an adult and doesn't require custody." The judge looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Mr. Kendall, I'm required to ensure this settlement is equitable. This is anything but." "Your Honor," Nelson interjected smoothly, "my client is of sound mind and has made this decision freely. He wishes to move forward with his life and believes this settlement achieves that goal." Judge Kane turned to Vera. "Mrs. Kendall, do you have any objection to these terms?" Vera struggled to keep the smile off her face. "No, Your Honor. If my husband wishes to be generous, I won't stop him." Catherine Wolfe shot Spencer one last suspicious look, clearly unable to believe her luck, but said nothing. "Very well," Judge Kane said, signing the preliminary order. "The 30-day waiting period begins today. If neither party objects, the divorce will be finalized on." She checked her calendar. January 15th. Spencer shook hands with Nelson outside the courtroom. "Thank you for trusting me." "I still think you're crazy," Nelson said. "But you're the calmest client I've ever had facing financial ruin." "I'm not facing ruin," Spencer said. "I'm facing liberation." Vera celebrated that night at Morton's Steakhouse with Clinton Hudson. He was 52, silver-haired, and exuded the kind of confidence that came from having his name on a dozen buildings across the city. "To your victory," Clinton said, raising his scotch. "To our future," Vera corrected, clinking her wine glass against his. "Have you thought about what you'll do with the house?" Clinton asked. "It's a nice property, but it's not really your style." "I'll sell it," Vera said. "The market's strong right now. Catherine says I could get $1.4 million for it, maybe more. Combined with the savings and the retirement fund, I'll have close to $2 million to invest." Clinton nodded approvingly. "Smart. I have some opportunities coming up if you're interested. Commercial properties, high-yield investments." Vera felt a thrill of excitement. This was the life she'd always wanted: power, money, respect. Spencer had held her back for years with his small dreams and smaller ambitions. Now she was free to soar. "What about Garrett?" Clinton asked, almost as an afterthought. Vera's expression soured. "What about him? He's Spencer's problem now. 24 years old and still living in his father's basement, playing video games and wasting his life." "I tried, Clinton. God knows I tried to motivate that boy, but he has no drive, no ambition." "Must be hard, having a son like that," Clinton said sympathetically. "You have no idea. My friends ask about him, and what can I say? That he dropped out of college? That he's never had a real job? It's embarrassing." Vera took a long drink of her wine. "At least now I can tell people I'm divorced and change the subject." Clinton reached across the table and took her hand. "You deserve better, Vera. You deserve everything you're getting." She smiled. "I plan to take everything I deserve. And more." 28 days into the waiting period, Spencer was packing up his things from the house in Riverside Oaks. Vera had already moved most of her belongings to a luxury apartment downtown, Clinton's building, naturally. Garrett helped him load boxes into a rented truck. They worked in comfortable silence, the way they often did. "You know," Garrett said, carrying out a box of books, "I keep waiting for her to call. To ask about you, about us." "She won't," Spencer said quietly. In her mind, she's already moved on. Doesn't that hurt? Spencer paused, looking up at the house where he'd raised his son. It did for a while. But you know what I realized? Vera never loved me. She loved what she thought I could give her. When I couldn't give her enough, she found someone who could. That's not love, Garrett. That's a transaction. And Mom sees everything as a transaction. She does. Which is why what's about to happen is actually poetic justice. Spencer checked his watch. How long until the bank calls? Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m., sharp. They'll inform her that the mortgage on the property was paid off early by Kindle Holdings LLC, and that as the beneficial owner, the company is exercising its right to reclaim the property. She'll have 30 days to vacate. And the cars. The lease company will contact her tomorrow afternoon. Both vehicles need to be returned immediately as the lease agreement has been terminated by the lessee, which is my company. The savings accounts. Garrett's smile was cold. Those are the best part. The accounts were set up as investment vehicles with my capital as collateral. When I withdraw that collateral, which I did yesterday, the accounts will show a balance of exactly $1,247.36. That's the only money she and Dad actually contributed over the years. Spencer whistled low. She thinks she has $340,000. She did. Until she didn't. Garrett loaded the last box. The retirement fund is trickier. That one is actually Dad's, but it was all invested in my company's stock. When I take the company private next week, that stock will be worthless to external holders. How much will she lose? Everything. By the end of January, Vera Nicholson will have exactly $1,247.36. No house, no cars, and no prospects. Garrett's voice was matter-of-fact, without malice but without pity either. And Clinton Hudson? Garrett's smile widened. Did I mention I just became the majority shareholder in Hudson Properties? Hostile takeover, all legal. I'm planning some significant restructuring, starting with Clinton himself. Spencer stared at his son. You bought his company? I bought controlling interest. Turns out Clinton was leveraged to the hilt, making risky deals to maintain his lifestyle. When I offered his shareholders 30% above market value, they couldn't sign fast enough. Garrett shrugged. First order of business next week. Fire the CEO for violation of company ethics policies. Specifically, misappropriation of company resources for personal relationships. You're going to destroy him. I'm going to hold him accountable. There's a difference. Garrett's eyes hardened. He knew she was married, Dad. He pursued her anyway, helped her plan this divorce, probably encouraged her to take everything. He's not innocent. Spencer pulled his son into a tight hug. When did you become so formidable? I learned from watching you, Garrett said. You taught me that real strength isn't loud. It's patient. It waits. And then it acts decisively. The call came at 9:03 a.m. on January 15th. Vera was in Clinton's apartment, having coffee and browsing real estate listings on her tablet. The divorce had been finalized the previous day. Everything she'd wanted was now legally hers. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Kendall? This is James Morrison from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding the property at 4782 Riverside Oaks Drive. Yes. Vera's voice was impatient. She had meetings scheduled with Catherine Wolfe about selling the house. Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been a significant error in the divorce settlement. The property in question is not actually owned by you or your ex-husband. It's owned by Kindle Holdings LLC, a private corporation. Vera's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. That's impossible. That house has been in my name for 18 years. I'm afraid not, ma'am. The property was purchased by Kindle Holdings LLC 6 months ago. The previous mortgage was paid off in full. You and Mr. Spencer Kendall were listed as leaseholders, not owners. The tablet slipped from Vera's hand, clattering onto the marble floor. What are you talking about? I just got that house in my divorce settlement. Ma'am, you cannot be awarded ownership of a property you don't own. Kindle Holdings LLC is the legal owner, and they've notified us that your lease agreement has been terminated. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Who is Kindle Holdings? Vera's voice was rising, panic creeping in. That's confidential information, ma'am. You'll need to speak with your attorney. Vera ended the call with shaking hands. Before she could process what she'd heard, her phone rang again. Different number. Mrs. Kendall? This is Superior Auto Leasing. We're calling about the two vehicles registered under your name, the Mercedes S-Class and the Range Rover. What about them? Both lease agreements have been terminated by the lessee, effective immediately. We need to arrange pickup of both vehicles today. You can't just take my cars. Ma'am, they're not your cars. They're leased vehicles, and the leaseholder has terminated the agreement. We can schedule a pickup time, or you can deliver them to our lot by 5 p.m. today. Vera screamed and threw her phone across the room, where it shattered against Clinton's expensive wallpaper. Clinton emerged from his bedroom, tying his robe. What the hell is going on? The house, it's not mine. The cars, they're taking them back. This doesn't make sense. Vera was pacing now, her perfect composure cracking. I need to call Catherine. I need to. Her laptop was still open on the counter. She pulled up her bank account to check the savings. Maybe she could use that money to fight this, to hire better lawyers, to fix whatever had gone wrong. The screen loaded. Checking account balance. $1,247.36. Vera stared at the number, certain it was a mistake. She refreshed the page. Same number. She logged out and logged back in. $1,247.36. No, she whispered. No. There was $340,000. I saw it. Catherine verified it. She called the bank, was transferred 3 times, finally got a manager who explained in bureaucratic language that the accounts had been investment vehicles with collateral that had been withdrawn, and that the remaining balance represented only her personal contributions over the years. But where did the money go? Vera screamed into the phone. The collateral was withdrawn by the account's primary investor, ma'am. It was all legal and properly documented. Who was the investor? Kindle Holdings LLC, ma'am. Vera ended the call. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold the phone. She looked up at Clinton, her face pale. It's gone. All of it. The house, the cars, the money. All of it. Clinton's face had gone carefully neutral. That's impossible, Vera. Catherine Wolfe said the settlement was ironclad. Apparently nothing was mine to begin with. Vera's voice cracked. Who is Kindle Holdings? Who owns it? Clinton's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his face went white. I need to take this. He stepped into his bedroom, closing the door. Vera could hear his voice rising, then falling to urgent, pleading tones. 5 minutes later, he emerged, his face ashen. I've been fired, he said quietly. What? Hudson Properties was acquired. Hostile takeover. The new majority shareholder just terminated me for ethics violations and misuse of company resources. Clinton sank onto the couch, looking 20 years older. I'm ruined. They're going to audit every deal I've made in the last 5 years. Vera, I've been playing loose with the books, using company money for personal expenses. If they find out. Vera felt the room spinning. Who bought your company? The paperwork says Kindle Holdings LLC. The name hit Vera like a physical blow. Kindle? As in, Spencer's Kindle. How could Spencer afford to buy my company? He's an architect who makes maybe $90,000 a year. Clinton shook his head. This doesn't make sense. But Vera's mind was racing, pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. Kindle Holdings. The house. The cars. The savings. All connected to that company. All connected to the Kindle name. Garrett, she whispered. What? Our useless son, Garrett. Vera's voice was hollow. Oh my God. It's Garrett. She grabbed her laptop and did what she should have done years ago. She Googled her son's name. The results made her physically ill. Garrett Kindle, CEO of Kindle Holdings LLC, valued at $3.2 billion. Tech entrepreneur Garrett Kindle acquires Singapore data firm. Billionaire Garrett Kindle, 24, named to Forbes 30 under 30. There were photos. Her son, her useless son, in a tailored suit, shaking hands with CEOs and politicians. Her son at charity galas, at tech conferences, at shareholder meetings. Her son, who she'd called lazy and worthless, was worth more than everyone she knew combined. And she'd just given him up in the divorce like he was a piece of broken furniture. Oh God, Vera moaned, clutching her stomach. Oh God, what have I done? Clinton was reading over her shoulder, his face growing paler with each article. You said he was a failure. You said he lived in their basement playing video games. He did. He does. I mean, Vera's voice trailed off as she remembered. Garrett in his room for hours, which she'd assumed was gaming but could have been working, building companies. making billions. The coffee table was covered in printouts from her research, each one a dagger to her heart. Garrett had built his fortune quietly, deliberately staying out of the spotlight. Most of his companies were privately held. He gave to charity anonymously. He lived modestly. He'd hidden in plain sight, and she'd been too blind and too arrogant to see what was right in front of her. A new thought struck her with the force of a truck. Spencer knew. That son of a bitch knew. What? Spencer knew about Garrett. That's why he gave me everything so easily. He knew it was all Garrett's money, Garrett's property. He knew I was taking nothing. Vera's laugh was edged with hysteria. He played me. They both played me. Her phone, Clinton's phone, since she'd destroyed hers, rang. It was Catherine Wolfe. Vera, we need to talk. I just received notification that the divorce settlement is being challenged. Kindle Holdings LLC is claiming that all marital assets were actually company property that was fraudulently included in the settlement. Can they do that? Vera's voice was desperate. If they can prove ownership, which they apparently can, then yes. Vera, who is Kindle Holdings? The documentation is bulletproof. These aren't amateurs. It's my son's company, Vera said flatly. Silence on the other end. Then, your son? The one you said was unemployed. Turns out he's a billionaire. Oops. Vera's voice broke. Catherine, fix this. Please. There has to be something. Vera, you signed away custody of your son. You publicly stated he was a financial burden. You took assets that apparently belonged to him. If he wanted to, he could probably sue you for fraud. Catherine's voice was grim. My advice. Get your own lawyer, because I can't represent you in this. It's a massive conflict of interest. The call ended. Vera sat in Clinton's expensive apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully constructed life, and finally understood what she'd done. She'd traded a son worth billions for a house worth millions. She'd abandoned the only person who had real value in pursuit of things that were worthless. And Spencer, the man she dismissed as weak and spineless, had let her do it. He'd smiled and signed the papers and let her walk straight into the trap. 30 days. It had taken 30 days for her entire world to collapse. Spencer sat in a coffee shop in Portland, sketching preliminary designs for the children's hospital. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and for the first time in years, he felt at peace. His phone rang. Garrett. How's Portland? His son asked. Beautiful. The hospital board loves the initial concepts. We break ground in March. Good. I wired the funding this morning. 50 million, anonymous donor. Should be enough to do it right. Spencer smiled. More than enough. How are things on your end? Interesting. Mom's been calling. 23 times in the last 2 days. Dad, she figured it out. I assumed she would, once the reality set in. She's claiming I owe her. That she's my mother and deserves to be taken care of. Garrett's voice was flat. She told one of my assistants that she made me who I am. What did you tell her? Nothing. I blocked her number. I have no interest in a relationship with someone who only values me when she thinks I can give her something. Garrett paused. Is that too harsh? No, son. That's self-preservation. Spencer took a sip of his coffee. What about Clinton? The SEC is investigating him for securities fraud. Turns out he's been running a bit of a Ponzi scheme with his investments. When I took over Hudson Properties, I found evidence of some very creative accounting. I handed it over to the authorities. And Vera, living in a motel on Route 7. She tried to go back to real estate, but her reputation is shot. Turns out people don't want to work with someone known for abandoning their billionaire son. Garrett's voice held no satisfaction, just a simple statement of fact. She's not homeless, not destitute. She has the $1,247 from the account. She can rebuild if she wants to work for it. Spencer thought about the woman he'd married, the woman who'd shared his life for 23 years. He felt pity for her, but not regret. I heard Raymond and Marion won't speak to her, Garrett continued. They're furious that she didn't tell them about me, that she cost them a connection to a billionaire. So they're just like her. Family only matters when there's profit in it. Exactly. Which is why I'm glad I have you, Dad. You wanted me when you thought I was broke. That means everything. Spencer felt his eyes well up. You were never broke, Garrett. Not where it mattered. Neither were you. They talked for a few more minutes about the hospital, about Garrett's plans to expand into renewable energy, about Spencer's idea to start teaching architecture at a local university. Simple things, future things, good things. When the call ended, Spencer returned to his sketches. He was designing a children's wing that would have natural light, gardens, spaces that would help sick kids heal faster. It was the kind of project he'd always dreamed about, but never had the budget for. Now, thanks to his son, he did. His phone buzzed with a text from Nelson Acevedo. Saw the news about Kindle Holdings. You magnificent bastard. You played her perfectly. Spencer didn't respond. He didn't need to gloat or celebrate. Vera's downfall wasn't his victory. It was simply the natural consequence of her choices. She'd valued money over people, status over love, and pride over wisdom. The universe had a way of teaching those lessons, sometimes gently, sometimes harshly. Vera had needed the harsh lesson. 3 months later, the Children's Hospital project was in full swing. Spencer had assembled a team of talented architects and designers, all passionate about creating something that would serve the community for generations. He was meeting with the construction team when Garrett surprised him by showing up at the site. "Garrett, what are you doing here?" Spencer embraced his son, who looked every inch the billionaire in his tailored Navy suit. "I wanted to see what $50 million looks like when it's being built with love instead of greed." Garrett smiled, looking around at the construction. "This is amazing, Dad." They walked the site together, Spencer explaining his vision for each wing, each garden, each healing space. Garrett listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he really understood what his father was trying to create. "You know," Garrett said as they stood looking at the foundation for the main building, "Mom called me again last week." Spencer's face tightened. What did she want? "To apologize," she said. "To explain that she made a mistake, that she's changed, that family should forgive family." Garrett's voice was neutral. "She wanted to meet for coffee. Did you go?" "No, but I did send her a response." Garrett pulled out his phone and showed Spencer the email. It was brief. "Vera, you're right that family should forgive family. Which is why I've forgiven you for calling me useless, for treating me like a burden, for choosing money over your own son. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You made your choice in that divorce settlement. You chose the house, the cars, the money. You chose everything except me. I hope those 30 days of believing you were rich were worth it. Don't contact me again. Gee." Spencer read it twice, then handed back the phone. "How did she respond?" "She didn't. But I heard from Raymond that she's been telling people I'm cruel, that I owe her, that she deserves my support because she gave birth to me. That's not how parent-child relationships work." "I know. That's why I've also hired a publicist to release a statement if needed. It's ready to go if she tries to use the media to paint herself as a victim." Garrett's eyes were hard. "I won't be manipulated, Dad. Not by her, not by anyone." Spencer felt a surge of pride. His son had learned to be strong not through cruelty, but through clear boundaries and self-respect. "Speaking of media," Garrett continued, "I'm being interviewed by Forbes next month about philanthropy and ethical business practices. They want to know about my philosophy on wealth and responsibility. What are you going to tell them?" Garrett smiled. "That I learned everything important from a man who chose to design playgrounds and parks instead of chasing money. That real wealth isn't what you have, but what you give and who you love." Spencer pulled his son into a fierce hug. "You're going to make me cry on a construction site." "Good. Real men cry, right? That's what you always told me." They stood together, looking at the hospital taking shape, a monument to everything Vera had never understood, that the best legacy isn't what you leave behind in a bank account, but what you build that makes the world better. "Dad," Garrett said quietly, "are you happy? Really happy?" Spencer thought about his new life in Portland, about the hospital he was building, about the teaching position he'd accepted at the university, about the simple apartment he rented with a view of Mount Hood. He thought about his freedom from a loveless marriage, about the relationship with his son that had only grown stronger. "I'm happier than I've been in 20 years, Spencer said honestly. "Vera thought she was taking everything. She had no idea she was setting me free." Garrett nodded. "And she's the one in prison now. A prison of her own making. Have you heard how she's doing? She's working as a receptionist at a dental office, barely making rent. Raymond and Marion won't help her. They're too embarrassed by the association. Clinton's in federal prison for securities fraud. Catherine Wolfe dropped her as a client." Garrett's voice held no triumph, just fact. "She has exactly what she valued. Nothing but money to worry about. And we have each other." "Yeah," Garrett said, smiling. "We do." The hospital opened 18 months later, a gleaming structure of glass and hope. The dedication ceremony was attended by the mayor, the hospital board, and hundreds of community members. Spencer stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Garrett sat in the front row, beaming with pride. "This building," Spencer said, "represents what we can accomplish when we build with purpose instead of profit as our primary goal. Every detail was designed to heal, to comfort, to inspire hope in children and families facing the hardest moments of their lives." He went on to thank the team, the donors, the community. He didn't mention Garrett by name. His son had insisted on anonymity, but everyone who mattered knew where the funding had come from. After the ceremony, as people toured the facility, a reporter from the local paper approached Spencer. "Mr. Kindle, I understand you went through a difficult divorce during the planning phase of this project. How did you maintain focus during such a challenging time?" Spencer smiled. "Divorce taught me to focus on what's real and lasting. Buildings, money, possessions, those things come and go. But the impact you make on people's lives, the love you share with those who matter, that's forever. Do you have any regrets?" "About the divorce? No. It freed me to do the work I was meant to do. Sometimes losing everything material is how you discover what's truly valuable." The reporter scribbled notes, then asked, "Is it true your ex-wife didn't realize your son is the billionaire Garrett Kindle?" Spencer's smile turned enigmatic. "I think my ex-wife learned an important lesson about judging people by their net worth instead of their character. Beyond that, I have no comment." That evening, Spencer and Garrett had dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. They toasted the hospital's opening, their future plans, and the life they'd built together. "You know what's funny?" Garrett said. "I could write Mom a check right now that would solve all her financial problems. $5 million would set her up for life. But you won't. No, because the money isn't the point. The lesson is." Garrett swirled his wine. "She needs to understand that people aren't commodities. That you can't throw away a relationship and then pick it back up when it becomes convenient. Has she learned that lesson? I don't know. And honestly, Dad, I don't care anymore. I spent the first 24 years of my life trying to earn her approval. I'm done." Garrett's voice was firm but not bitter. "I have you. I have my work. I have friends who knew me before the money and stuck around after. That's enough." Spencer raised his glass. "To being enough, exactly as we are." They clinked glasses, father and son, two men who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. 5 years later, Spencer received an unexpected letter. It was from Vera, handwritten on plain paper. "Dear Spencer, I know I have no right to contact you, and I don't expect a response. I'm writing because my therapist suggested it might help me find closure. I've spent the last 5 years thinking about what I did, what I lost, who I became. You were right about everything. I was shallow, materialistic, cruel. I treated our son like he was worthless, and I threw away a man who loved me for things that never mattered. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or for money. I'm writing to tell you that I finally understand what you tried to show me for 23 years, that the richest life is the one filled with purpose and love, not possessions. I work as a receptionist now. I live in a small apartment. I volunteer at a women's shelter on weekends. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. I'm finally learning what it means to be a decent human being. I know Garrett will never speak to me again, and I've accepted that. I don't deserve his forgiveness. But I hope someday he knows that I'm genuinely sorry and that I'm trying to be better. I hope you're happy, Spencer. You deserve happiness. Vera." Spencer read the letter twice, then called Garrett. "She wrote you too?" Garrett asked. "You got one?" "Yeah, practically identical. Very therapy speak, lots of I've changed language." Garrett paused. "What do you think? Is it real?" Spencer thought about the woman he'd married, the woman who destroyed their family for money and status. He thought about the 5 years that had passed, the time that could change people if they let it. "I think people can change," Spencer said slowly. "I also think change doesn't erase consequences. She's living the life her choices earned her. That's not cruelty, it's justice." "So you won't respond?" "No. Will you?" "No," Garrett said firmly. "She made her bed. She can lie in it. That's the lesson." Spencer agreed. He burned the letter that evening, watching the paper curl and blacken in his fireplace. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. 10 years after the divorce, Spencer sat in his university office, grading student projects. At 68, he was still teaching, still designing, still finding joy in creating spaces that served people. There was a knock on his door. A young woman stood there, nervous. Professor Kendall? I'm Melissa Raymond. I'm your niece. Vera's brother Raymond's daughter. Spencer studied her. She had Vera's eyes, but a softer face, an openness that Vera had lost long ago. Please, sit down. Melissa sat, wringing her hands. I know this is awkward. My family doesn't talk to Aunt Vera anymore, and I know there's bad blood between you all. Why are you here, Melissa? Because I'm getting my architecture degree, and you're the reason why. She pulled out a worn folder. When I was 13, my dad took me to see the children's hospital you designed. It was the most beautiful building I'd ever seen. I asked my dad who made it, and he said you did. Spencer felt a lump in his throat. He also told me you were a failure, that you'd wasted your life on small projects instead of chasing money. But I looked at that hospital, Professor, and I thought, if that's failure, I want to fail exactly like that. Melissa smiled through tears. You changed my life that day, and I wanted to thank you. Spencer came around the desk and hugged his niece. You have no idea how much that means to me. They talked for 2 hours. Melissa showed him her portfolio, designs for community centers, public libraries, affordable housing. All the things Spencer had dedicated his life to. What does your father think of your choice? Spencer asked. Melissa's face fell. He's disappointed. He wanted me to go into commercial development, make real money. He still doesn't understand that some things matter more than profit. Then he hasn't learned anything in 10 years. No, but I have. Melissa looked directly at Spencer. Aunt Vera lost everything chasing money. My dad is miserable even though he's wealthy. And you're happy, really happy, even though you never got rich. I did get rich, Spencer corrected gently. Just not in the way your family measures wealth. As Melissa left, promising to stay in touch, Spencer felt a surge of gratitude. Vera's choices had created ripples that spread far beyond her own life. Some of those ripples had caused pain, but others, like Melissa, had become something beautiful. The universe had balance, after all. Spencer was 82 when he received the call that Vera had died. Heart attack, sudden, at 79 years old. He attended the funeral, not because he owed her anything, but because some part of him, the part that had loved her once, long ago, needed closure. The service was small. Raymond and Marion were there, older and grayer. A few co-workers from the dental office where Vera had worked for 15 years. And Garrett, who had flown in from Singapore for his father's sake, not for his mother's memory. Vera had requested to be cremated, her ashes scattered in the park where she and Spencer had had their first date 57 years ago. She changed in the end, the minister said. She found humility, purpose, and peace in service to others. She spent her final years volunteering at shelters and food banks, giving what little she had to those with less. Spencer wondered if it was true, or if it was just the kind of thing ministers said at funerals. He'd never know. After the service, Raymond approached him hesitantly. Spencer, I'm sorry. For everything. Spencer looked at Vera's brother, seeing an old man haunted by regret. Are you sorry for what happened, or sorry that it cost you access to Garrett's wealth? Raymond flinched. Both, if I'm honest. I've been a fool. Yes, Spencer said simply. You have. There was nothing more to say. Spencer walked away, Garrett at his side. Are you okay, Dad? Garrett asked. I'm fine. Sad for the woman she could have been, grateful for the life I have instead. Spencer took a deep breath of spring air. She got 30 days of thinking she'd won everything. I got 30 years of actually having everything that matters. Garrett smiled. Yeah, you did. Spencer Kendall died peacefully in his sleep at 87, surrounded by his son, his grandchildren. Garrett had married a brilliant surgeon and they had 3 kids, and the legacy of buildings he'd created that would serve communities for generations. His obituary noted his contributions to architecture, his dedication to public service, his passion for creating spaces that healed and inspired. It mentioned the children's hospital that bore a plaque, added anonymously by Garrett, reading, Designed by Spencer Kendall, a man who measured wealth in smiles, not dollars. At his funeral, Garrett spoke about his father's greatest lesson. He taught me that real strength isn't in holding on to things, but in knowing what to let go. He let go of a house, cars, money, all the things my mother thought mattered. And in doing so, he showed me what actually does matter: integrity, purpose, and love. The church was packed with former students, colleagues, families whose children had been treated at the hospital Spencer designed. and people whose lives had been touched by his kindness. Melissa Raymond Coleman, now a prominent architect in her own right, spoke about how Spencer had inspired her career. He proved that you can live richly without chasing riches, that you can leave a legacy without leaving a fortune. As Garrett scattered his father's ashes in the same park where Vera's had been scattered years before, he thought about the irony. His parents had started in this place full of hope and love. They'd ended here too, but on such different terms. Vera had spent 30 days believing she'd won everything, then 25 years learning she'd lost what mattered. Spencer had spent 30 days losing everything material, then 30 years proving that he'd actually won. The lesson was simple. Be careful what you measure as victory. Sometimes the real prize is what you're too blind to value until it's gone. Garrett looked up at the sky, feeling the spring breeze, and smiled. His father had taught him that lesson well, and he'd passed it on to his own children, who would pass it on to theirs. The Kindle legacy wasn't billions in the bank. It was wisdom, integrity, and the knowledge that the best things in life can't be divided in a divorce settlement because they were never possessions to begin with. Spencer Kindle had won his war not through revenge or cruelty, but through simply understanding what truly mattered. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.